Find out, how does Sterling compare to what United already have in their squad?
Well, yesterday night on Soccer Special, Troy Deeney on the panel said if Raheem Sterling was to make the move to Old Trafford, then he would be better than what they already have in those positions. So very interesting to then compare them. Just worth noting before we look into some of the players here, Ahmad, who of course has been playing a right midfield, or right wing, I should say, for United. He of course didn't play too much last season, so he's not here, but we'll show you three other options United have at their disposal. Looking at games played, of course, Raheem Sterling played quite a lot for Chelsea last season, whether that was on the left wing or the right wing. Compared to the others, they all played a decent amount of games, but let's go on and find out a bit more about how they performed last season in the Premier League. Raheem Sterling got a few goals last season, and he has done consistently for Chelsea last season. Antony, perhaps, as we know, struggled a little bit towards or throughout the season to find his best form. But Marcus Rashford, Alejandro Garnacho, playing predominantly on the left wing, both contributed to United, but perhaps Garnacho a bit more consistent. Let's look at the assists. In terms of that, it's probably not a lot really to look into that, really, in terms of to differentiate between these players. The only thing I would probably highlight is Marcus Rashford perhaps didn't really reach those levels of previous seasons last year, and Antony again struggling, but Raheem Sterling, Garnacho perhaps in front as we go through last season. Looking at the minutes per goal, again, we've already talked about Antony's struggles last season, but Raheem Sterling here, 247.6 minutes per goal, but his games played were slightly lower. You look at Marcus Rashford, Garnacho, who predominantly played on the left wing, were perhaps a bit more consistent on that front as well, considering they played more games. Chances created now, and this is where I would probably draw my own conclusions, because I think when you look at Alejandro Garnacho, of course, he has played a lot of games for someone so young, but he's really made that left wing position his own when he's had the opportunities. You look at Raheem Sterling, he's able to do a little bit as well on both the wings, considering he did change position a little bit. The other two, Antony and Marcus Rashford, not so much. But let's look at touches in the opposition box next. And again, I think this is where, when it does come up, Alejandro Garnacho, when it does come up, it's absolutely fine. But what I will say is, when we did look at those stats earlier, Garnacho was really leading the four of them again. And for me, Raheem Sterling could be a good addition because he can play both the wings, of course. But for me, if that maybe stumps Garnacho's progression, is it worth it? I mean, what do you both think?
I've been surprised that Garnacho has not started the season for Manchester United, given his productivity last season. And whenever I watched Manchester United last season, I thought he was their best player. I was very, very impressed. So a little bit of a surprise that he sat out the first two games, albeit he's an excellent option for Manchester United to have from the bench. And maybe perhaps that tells you something about how good Diallo's been on the wing for him to have got the nod on the right-hand side. My concern would be, if you look at all those players other than Antony, Sterling, Rashford, Garnacho, would you say that, Nabaid, that all of them, their best positions on the left?
Probably, and so then you've kind of got the problem of where does Sterling fit in, but as we saw at City, Sterling can play off the right. Sterling can also play through the middle, to be honest. I think the big key difference for me is he's a goal scorer, and Garnacho, although I completely agree, is probably Manchester United's most dangerous forward. He's still young, still often makes mistakes in front of goal. Rashford's been out of form, like Dan said. And then Antony, as you've seen by the stats, isn't someone who's going to score goals for you. So Sterling might be the one that gets them into double figures from a forward perspective, and that might be useful. But as you just said there, I don't know if an out-and-out left winger is exactly what United need at this point.
Do you think maybe they're earmarking Sterling to be on that right-hand side based on what he did for Manchester City that couple of years where he played right, stayed very wide and came into the box and got on the end of things? And it was the same with Sane on the other side. But it's obviously very different doing that for Manchester City in that team to what Manchester United are at the moment. And even in those first two games, I'm still not really sure what Manchester United are.
Well, Erik ten Hag has said that he's gone on record saying that he wants United to be the best transition team in the world. So does that suit Sterling?
I wouldn't say so. Sterling, that Manchester City period, sort of benefited from back post chances, lots of balls being put into the box. United don't put the ball in from the left-hand side because unless Shaw's fit, which he hasn't been, Mazraoui's he's two-footed, but he's a right-footed left-back. He's not going to be someone who gets down the line and crosses it in. And then in transition, Raheem Sterling is not as quick as he once was. He's definitely going to be someone who's going to be waiting for chances to come his way in and around the box. I actually said this a few years ago, that I feel like long-term he might end up being a fox-in-the-box centre-forward. So I don't know whether Manchester United and the transitional signing of Sterling makes much sense in terms of what they're trying to do. But I think it sort of speaks to the fact that, yes, they've got Sancho, and they sort of want to let Sancho go. Can we get someone in place?
I mean, we've been talking quite a lot there about Raheem Sterling, Jadon Sancho. Obviously, Chelsea aren't the only team in the race for Sancho, because Juventus is still pushing to sign the player. They're expected to propose a loan deal that would incorporate a loan fee plus a percentage of the wages that they would be able to pay. Juventus's proposal would require United to cover a portion of Sancho's salary. It's thought United would require the loan fee as well to be a substantial one. How have United got on in terms of sales, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, actually, when you look at it, because we were talking a bit earlier about Scott McTominay getting close to his move to Napoli, and also Hannibal confirming his move. But when you look at what United have done in the last decade, it's really interesting reading, because actually, with McTominay's fee going through, this is actually their second best window in the last decade in terms of sales. And I think what you have to also acknowledge is, the likes of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Willy Kambwala are all part of that total as well. But what doesn't show up there are also the players who left at the end of last season, the likes of Rafa Varane, Anthony Martial, who left at the end of their contract. So wages-wise, they would have been off the books as well. So I think you do have to look at what United have done in terms of their new structure. Omar Barada in as CEO, Jason Wilcox as the technical director, and Dan Ashworth as the sporting director as well. They've been able to change United's strategy, and mentioned with Hannibal, we're seeing more of the likes of sell-on clauses that have been included in a lot of the players who have left the club. So you would hope, for United's point of view, in the future, they're going to recoup a bit more money if those players move on in the future. So it's a different strategy, and clearly it's worked so far in this window.